Nerd alert.
I'm real estate.
This is a fun question, and you're out there going, I'm gonna
He's totally failing already on the question, and we haven't even gotten the answer yet.
if we assume that retirement happens in 21.6 years from now, and we get a 10% return on our money in $1 million, and we get a 7% return on our money in the brokerage account, then it would take approximately 18.6 years for us to break even.
You know, my investors actually appreciate the fact that I sound like that.
Welcome to Drunk Real Estate. Grab a drink and enjoy the show.
Hey there, and welcome to episode 19 of Drunk Real Estate. I am Kyle Wilson, affectionately known as Ashley Wilson's husband. And once again, we got a special guest here. Everyone say hi to Nathan Brooks. Hi, Nathan.
What's happening?
What's up? Nathan is filling in for Mauricio. Nathan, for those who don't know about you, why don't you give us a little rundown of what you've been up to?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you for allowing all of the hundreds of people who harassed Jay to help me onto this show. So thank you for that. I'm mainly a single family investor and builder developer, and flipped over 1,000 properties and developed a number of different large single and multifamily developments. And so just really fired up about both building, and also I have a fair size Airbnb portfolio as well. So I really enjoy those short-term, mid-term rentals that we, 5, 10, 20x our cash flow from those single family.
Anybody who's looking to get into flipping, would you recommend any books that they should read or anything?
It's funny that you mentioned that, because I heard that there was some guy on this podcast that wrote a few of them, but I'm not sure which one I should identify.
You wrote a book?
No.
Kyle hasn't even read a book.
Wait,
I'm actually a ghostwriter.
I also wrote a book too. So, am I supposed to then pitch my own book, or Jay?
This is your opportunity.
He was giving you the opening.
The No Quitters Guide, of course, is the one to start with, because that gets you in the mindset and the mentality, and then you can go to all those smarter guys.
Well, Nathan, did you come prepared? Do you got something to drink for us?
Absolutely. So I bought this after a long date night. So I have date night with my wife every Tuesday. So guys out there, make sure you don't screw this up. So after having a number of bottles of wine, I went into a liquor store and bought the Whistle Pig 18.
Whistle Pig.
Which is absolutely delicious and overpriced.
No, that's good. I have that in my bar too. It's good whiskey.
And I also want to mention I am drinking it out of this mountain glass, because it's important to drink your Whistle Pig out of something that's really manly.
Mountain glass. Do the mountains turn blue when it's cold, or is it just a normal glass?
No, just a normal glass.
Nice.
All right. By the way, I have the same strategy. I get my wife drunk during date night as well.
It works every time.
Nah, half the time.
Half the time. I always screw up the line out of Anchorman, but if somebody else can pull that Anchorman, 100% of the time, 60%?
60% of the time it works every time. But don't let him. Jay only gets his wife drunk once a year on his anniversary. So, AJ, how's it going over there, man?
Going good. I got my fountain drink Diet Coke tonight. I'm going crazy. So none of that canned crap. This is the real stuff.
Does that taste as good as the McDonald's fountain Coke? That's something about McDonald's fountain Coke's always better than normal Coke.
Do you want to know why? It's because of how they freeze it and how it goes through their tubes. It's true. They cool it down as it goes through the tubes, and they have a special way. McDonald's has a special way of doing it, and it tastes really, really good. You're right.
So you bought that and replicated it in your house, including a McDonald's kiosk?
It's in my office, and not the McDonald's kiosk, but I definitely need that. So the amount of Coke products that my office goes through is crazy. We're very good friends with the Coke people here. So
see, that wasn't even on my list of guesses. I either guessed they were getting it from Mexico, because that's a fun fact. Mexico actually uses real sugar still. So that's why when you go to the grocery store, you see that Mexican Coca-Cola that's more expensive. Or back in the day, I thought maybe they were still sneaking a little bit of cocaine in there, and that's what everyone was still getting it. But
AJ, next time you go to Atlanta, you need to go to the Coca-Cola Museum. At the end of the tour, there is a sampling place where you can taste Coke from around the world, and the recipes from different countries are different. And so, like every country, the Coke tastes different, and you can. It's really really cool.
And if you go to the Coke Museum in Mexico, in Tijuana, it's a much different museum.
Much
the Coke
different.
Museum there, and the sampling is very different.
Very
a lot of gold
different.
beads and a lot of gold
Do not
guns.
do it 24 hours between returning back to the United States.
But you're gonna have a great night that night.
You just won't remember it. But, it'll be great.
Jay, how's it going over there?
Good. Yeah, I'm doing well. So for those who didn't get Nathan's reference on how he got here, we knew Mauricio was going to be gone this week, so I posted on Facebook that we were looking for a replacement. Who had a recommendation? And Nathan went out to his Facebook community and basically said, post a reply on my post that he should be the guy. And after 2 days of nonstop barrage of posts and DMs, we negotiated a ceasefire where I told him he could come on the show if he got all his followers to stop sending me messages.
Yeah, we're glad you got him out. What are you drinking?
I am drinking a Napa Cab, my daily drinker, Oberon.
You got to switch this up, Jay. Jeez, like you're just going the same couple wines, and they're always from Costco. Maybe just make a trip down to the corner store every once in a while.
So if my wife were drinking, I'd open up something nice, but she's with the boys at soccer, so
we already determined she only drinks on your anniversary. So.
she only lets me get her drunk once a year.
All right, fair enough. Well, let's get this show on the road here. I see AJ's studying up. I don't want to leave him hanging for too long. So let's talk a
But
little
Kyle,
about...
you didn't say what you're drinking.
Oh yeah, I always
see?
forget that. Thank you.
See, I knew we picked Nathan for a reason.
He's already better than Mauricio.
See, Kyle's all business, man. This is not a game for him. He's on top of it. That's why he forgets.
I got to keep everyone in control. Well, no, so I gave Jay shit there, but then I wasn't able to buy any new bourbons today because I ended up going golfing. I was planning on stopping, so I went back with my little clear. It says water, but it gets you there going. So
No
carbs. Excellent. Okay, let's get going here. Let's talk about unions and strikes. We thought this was just the summer of strikes, but it's turned it into a full year. Over the numbers are up to 326,000 workers have gone on strike in 2023. That's across the auto industry, Hollywood, hotels, hospitals. It seems like every industry is getting a strike going on right now. On the surface, it seems like it's just kind of higher pay at the forefront, but for most of these strikes, there's other things going on. So, but AJ, so is there more important issues underlying in all these strikes, or is it kind of just a cut and dry thing with pay and benefits?
It's really, we're seeing kind of two main drivers, inflation being the first one. That's a key factor to all the strikes is the middle class America, which we've talked about a lot, and the pain that they're feeling. So people are demanding higher pay to compensate for increased costs. But it also comes on the back of automation and new technology. Workers are scared, and large corporations are feeling the impact of higher wage salaries and what that means. And so they're drawing harder lines, and they're spending lots of money on technology. The way a lot of these contracts work, some of this is not purposely set up, but it's part of a process, right? Now, when we're looking at the large ones, like the United Auto Workers, which is the big one today, and this is with the car companies, all the major car companies in the United States. Ford, General Motors, for example, these are very, very large demands. So you're talking about a 40% hourly pay increase.
Whoa. They've backed down to 36%. Don't exaggerate.
Yes, they backed down to 36% of the last couple of weeks. So they went down a few percentage points there. A reduction with that to 32-hour work weeks, and a shift back to traditional pensions. the elimination of any compensation tiers, and the restoration of cost living adjustments. And they want their retiree benefits enhanced, and they want enhanced vacation and family leave benefits. Don't we all? And so the total cost to this from outside groups like Anderson Economic Group is an estimated, so first of all, just the strike in general is an estimated $5.5 billion loss.
That's Dr. Evil money right there.
After what period of time, AJ? How long is that?
What they rough for the third week of the strike. So far, $5.5 billion economic loss for the third week of the strike. The problem is, though, as Ford and others said, we'd go bankrupt. So they're sitting here going, we're not making any progress because the demands that they want to meet, we can't pay because we will literally go bankrupt. So we're at a line here with these very large strikes with these auto workers, and the auto workers unions, right? A lot of people too, by the way, think unions are really, really big. Unions are only 10% of the population of the United States. They were much larger. They had, when they started out, the purpose of them had a lot more meaning and impact, but almost all the negotiated things that unions did when they originally started and the purpose they started have now become law. So the idea of unions and why they were created and everything have basically just become law for all workers in the United States. So because of that, you have legacy union type things. But other than that, they're kind of irrelevant.
And just to throw a number on that, so it's 10% now, but back in 1983, 20% of the workforce was union.
Yeah, and when you talk about like a lot of that's law, let's not forget it's law thanks to the fact that unions pushed for things like worker safety. I mean, 100 years ago, thousands of people a year were dying in mines.
They got a case of the black lung.
Exactly. Women working in apparel shops were working 80 hours a week in sweatshops, and so we didn't have weekends. I mean, literally, if you were working 80 years ago, you were working 6 or 7 days a week, and so
no sick leave, no nothing.
So you can argue that unions are a legacy thing and we don't need them anymore. But who's to say that the inroads that were made 100 years ago aren't going to be made again over the next 100 years, and that the benefits that unions have brought us over many, many decades isn't going to continue. And so I agree.
Check this out. So Ray Dalio had a article the other day that I read. So he commented that 50% of the current jobs become obsolete by 2025. So when I think about this story and when I think about this problem, I keep thinking about not just the auto workers, but I'm thinking about, all those fast food restaurants, or think about Amazon and how they've come in just a short period of time in automation. And so what I'm thinking about is like, are they actually having to cover people who are working now, or are they actually trying to assess in 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 years down the road that so many people are actually going to be out of a job because automation, AI, these things are actually going to take over, and the smartest minds in the world are saying, hey, 50% of the workforce in the current jobs become obsolete.
Well, they've literally said that in a couple of cases. So first of all, with the United Auto Workers, one of the big issues that, they have this whole pay increase thing, and for the public image, it's all about, okay, the CEOs, their wages went up by 34%. Ours should have too. That's their public. But if you look kind of underneath the hood, they're worried about the electric cars. And they're worried about, okay, all of these electric car subsidies and all of these electric cars, they're being built somewhere else. They're not being built in my factory. And so when the shift happens there, what happens to my factory? What happens to me? And if you look in the case of the Hollywood strike, the Hollywood strike, their original proposal is they wanted to completely ban any use of AI, including so if you use Google Docs with like the AI predictive the typing and stuff like that, they wanted to ban any use of that. And so basically the writers were seeing, look, like this AI is kind of scary. They could start replacing us. Like we want to try and get that banned, which is completely ridiculous in itself, that just you can't use technology going forward. And so the problem that I see with this is that by something like the Hollywood strike, by them shutting down, it's almost like pushing the industry to start using those things. Like it's pushing, like it's especially if you make this unreasonable for the Ford plant to use workers because their wages and their pay is too high and their what they're giving for insurance and stuff like that, then it all of a sudden becomes more and more cost available for them to automate more, to put more robots in, to do all this stuff. So I think it's almost, a negative that they're not, looking to the future and seeing it.
I mean, if you look at the car companies around the globe, already today, our labor costs are massively more. So we are already at a complete disadvantage as car companies in the United States because of labor cost and the cost to do business. So these are literally legacy things that, frankly, too, most of these companies want abolished. They want them gone. And they need to get these jobs. They're uncompetitive and it's not affordable for them anymore. Hence the reason why Detroit looks the way that it does, because all of this is moving out to a place that it's more economical so they can compete on a global landscape.
But but that's part of what we're talking about here. This is capitalism at work. It's capitalism at the bottom of the stack as opposed to the top of the stack. This is workers basically using their free market rights to organize and try to strong arm their employers into giving them more. And it's the exact same thing that employers do to their employees. We don't argue when employers say, hey, I'm going to pay my employees as little as possible. I'm going to give them as few benefits as possible because I want to maximize my profits. This is employees saying the exact same thing. Now, I agree with you, Kyle, that if employees decide to take too hard-nosed of a stance, they're going to drive employers to make a difficult decision. And that decision may be, okay, we're happy to shut you out. We'll take a hit for a couple of years and we'll start to replace you with automation. And that's it's game theory. That's the risk that workers need to take.
Well, they've already lost 2,500 employees have been laid off. Is it 25? Let me get the exact numbers. They've already started laying off employees.
Well, that was the trickle down, right? So what they said is, okay, you shut down these factories. These factories did this. Well, because these factories are shut down, then this factory is not getting as much work. So we got to lay off 25 employees. I saw it as kind of a negotiation tactic, which is shitty with people's lives, but that's kind of. But
they're doing it back. So it's like Jay said. And one of the problems, though, I think this is kind of a last grasp for relevance, because the vast majority of these jobs are being moved offshores, electric cars and automation. They're worried about it. The companies are all headed that way.
Or even onshore, just non-union, like Tesla is just laughing to the bank right now.
Yeah. They're totally uncompetitive. So it's like, yes, they have the right to do that, but also they're fighting against things that are not their employer. These are economic forces that do not care about that, because at the end of the day, Americans support the union workers, except when they go to buy the products. And that is shown time and time again. As of right now, 58% of Americans say they support the union strike. Also, 80% of Americans say they will not pay a premium for cars built by union workers. So what do you do? Because that heartstring pulls, but at the end of the day, nobody's going to back it ever. So they're going to buy Toyota. They're going to buy another car.
The question I have is, I read 43 of the locations are already are under strike, and they had said that they were threatening other locations. And so what is the long-term play? And also within that was 20. So you guys said first 40% and then 36% increase. And then the automakers actually offered a 20% increase, which is still unfathomable, I think.
Yes.
But that's spread out over how many years? Like 4 or 5 years or something?
4 years. So their latest offer is 20% for the 4-year contract, but they would also restore all cost of living adjustments that have been gone since 2008. They would eliminate tiered system of wages and a pay scale. They've agreed to convert all temporary workers within the last 90 days of service to permanent status. They've agreed for temporary workers in the futures would be raised to a $21 an hour minimum. And the company also granted union rights to strike over any plant closure during the life of the contract. They said that they would boost the 401k requirement accounts by 6.4% contribution. So there's a whole bunch of things, but they've come back with a lot. And the union came back with a 3% reduction in a ginormous pay increase. And so that's when the last issues was Ford's like, we'll go bankrupt.
And that ridiculous 32-hour work week, which I think is just a throwaway. There's no way. Like, I think that's kind of just an offset thing, because from what it seems like is that a lot of these plants, they have them overworking where they're working 50, 60 hours. And so they're just trying to make a point by saying, okay, 32-hour work week.
Is it a red herring? It's like, go chase this thing while we fight you on something else that we actually want.
It's negotiation. And unions historically have been the best in the world at negotiation. They typically get a good deal because they know how to negotiate. And we can say they're taking too hard nose of a stance right now, and they should be backing down, and they're not giving enough. But historically, it works. And so let them do what they're going to do. And at the end of the day,
too, they have the highest rate of fraud. So unions are notoriously tied in with the mafia. And
a lot of money in unions. They're making a lot of money in that back end.
The union people, they live it up, because what they actually, if you look at the unions, very select unions have actually benefited the union member over the long term, because most of the unionized industries are dying. So it didn't matter what they did over the long term. Short term wins, yes, but the union uppers have made off like bandits and enriched themselves.
But that's just the way that so like the argument is that basically that's what the CEO and all the people of these car companies are doing right now, right? Like, they're just making off like bandits, and they're not fairly compensating the people below. But like, that's kind of just the way business works. Like, if all of a sudden they have a bad year, it's not like the employees are going to be like, oh, we'll take a pay cut because the profits of our company went down, so we should take a pay cut on that. That's not how it works. The way it works is that the people who run the business, they get paid based off the performance of the business. The people below, they get paid off of doing their job. Like, I was saying this before we got on. I actually worked in a car parts factory on the line. And that's like, you do your job at the speed that you're told to do it, and that's it. Like, there's no like outperforming. There's no doing it. Like, you get paid your salary for doing your job. And it's funny, where I grew up in southwestern Ontario, it used to be massive car factories, car parts plants, all that stuff. And this is what happened. It literally, the unions got out of control, their demands. We had people, I had one of my friends, like, he was working just a normal grunt worker, making six figures, working in one of these car parts factories, had a full pension, had all this stuff. And what happens? The plants go to business. They get moved to Mexico. They get moved all these different places. And I actually saw one of the funniest things that I saw. And it's not funny in the sense that, like, people lost their jobs and stuff, but it's funny in the way that it got turned around. Is Caterpillar, which is, they're not car parts, but they make like large machinery. Yeah. They had a factory in right about half hour from my house, and they were paying workers too much. Same thing, union. And they came back and said, we're not making any money. And they went to the unions, and they actually proposed that everybody in the factory gets a pay cut and 50% reduction in their benefits for us to stay open. And the union wouldn't even take the meeting, wouldn't even consider it. Shut down the factory, moved it. Everyone lost their jobs. So like it does work both ways, and it's kind of an insight to, okay, that's what could happen. And the one thing that Elon Musk has going for him, he's proved that, okay, you push me too far, I will pick up and move. And so like the whole, we're going to unionize thing, Elon's saying, you unionize, I'm just going to move to a different state where it's harder to unionize. And
he's moving back, by the way.
Think so?
So yeah, he said he's moving back.
So one of the biggest problems, though, that I have with all of this is, at the end of the day, it's us that are subsidizing the union workers. Because, first of all, the products, of course, consumers, but we bail the car companies out. They're the only private industries that, for some reason, that don't have infrastructural capabilities like banking that we all depend on. It's not a financial,
like the airlines. The airlines got bailed out.
Or the airlines, that our government goes in and bails out due to employment. And when you look at this, you say, hold on here. The unions know we can drive you bankrupt because every time you do, the taxpayers come in here and bail you out. And that to me is so ridiculous that you're arguing for a 40% pay increase, 32-hour work weeks, and we end up bailing you out when you guys fail. And I think
that's not exclusive to industries that are unionized. I mean, we bailed out
no,
the
it's
banks.
not. But the cars, it is. I'm talking about the car companies, and it is exclusive to them because we bail them out. And I'm saying that we bail them out, and yet they're uncompetitive, right? They can't get competitive. They have these high labor costs, and then they're forcing it, and it's like
basically they're treating it like they're a public company that's that's necessary for infrastructure for the running of our company, when
we're subsidizing the car companies in America.
So let me ask a quick question here. So what do people do? Like when I'm thinking about this, I think about like the teenager going to Target making $22 an hour or whatever crazy number it is, or Panda Express is like $25 an hour for a cook. So what do you think actually, when you extrapolate this problem out, because you can't pay $100,000, like Kyle said, to a guy making auto parts, what in the world do we do as this thing evolves and actually creates the economy that we're living in now and that will continue, to
let them fail.
Let them fail.
But at the end of the day, there's going to be a labor crisis if they fail and unions go away. Basically, what we've done with unions is we've taken some of the onus off the government, some of the rights away from the government to define regulation, to basically say this is the way you must treat workers, this is how much you must pay workers, and we've put that back in the hands of private industry. And isn't that what capitalism is about? Basically, the government staying out of it and saying, business owners, you figure it out. We're going to let you go and figure it out. You negotiate with your employees. You make offers and negotiate wages and salaries, and we're going to stay out of it. And that's what we want, right? We want the government to stay out of it. But now we're saying unions should go away. And if unions go away, well, somebody has to step in and protect workers' rights, and that's going to be the government.
The government already has. That's my problem with it. We have unions, but everything the unions fought for, the government stepped in and already does. And if you look at it, when you look at these people, one of the biggest problems we have is these are not qualified laborers for what they get. So they're getting a rate that more qualified people in the private sector do not receive.
But how do you qualify that number, though?
What do you mean? How do you qualify the number?
How do you qualify like what is a reasonable number for that person to make versus
it's
like
the problem Detroit had. The reason why Detroit, they lost all the workers, right? Those workers were not skilled workers in anything else except being on a line. And they were paid at rates and levels they could not replace those jobs with. So you have a lot of workers that are unskilled workers that do not mesh into the new economy. And they're being paid and they're being really subsidized at a higher level, and they're fighting for it. When pensions started, they were 100% necessary. Absolutely. There's no question about it. The government, though, now does more than was negotiated by the original pensions. They have more protections, more rights. They have Social Security, which they didn't have anything like that. So now we have the government and we have pensions that are both doing the same thing. Excuse me, not pensions, but we have the union workers that are doing the same things. And two, the government is very involved in the unions. And like some of them, you have to be able to let workers unionize. So if we want to leave it up to capitalism, let's do. But that means no more unions will exist because no employers will ever agree to it.
I think at the end of the day, there's two types of jobs. There's jobs based on meritocracy. The best get paid more, and that's what we see in industries of innovation. Go to the tech industry, go to Silicon Valley. You'll never see unions there because employees say, "Hey, I want to get paid 3 times as much as the guy sitting next to me for doing the same job because I'm 3 times as good as he is." But then you go to work in a Starbucks, and one barista is going to be pretty much as good as another barista. And there's no meritocracy there. And at the end of the day, the employer is going to negotiate salaries down to the bare minimum. They'll bring in bad workers. They'll bring in the people that will accept the lowest pay. And that's bad for consumers. It's bad for the business. It's bad for the economy. And so the middle ground there is you let workers organize. And again, we're going to see in industries where there are unions, those are the jobs that are going away because, again, they're not merit-based. Those are the things that are going to be replaced by AI. They're going to be replaced by machines as they have been for the last 80 years. And so I think this problem goes away in 20 years because those jobs go away, and that's a whole separate discussion. But for the next 20 years, we've seen this evaporation of the middle class, and we've seen a lot of people who are struggling right now. And the best way for them to kind of get back on their feet is either they negotiate better conditions, better pay at work, or the government steps in and does it for them. And we don't want the government to step in, so let's let them go.
Well, there's a decent argument to say that's the divide is the union's fault, though, too, right? Like if you let's just look at the farming. So the farming industry down south, where they can, they have some rules for bringing in for foreign workers for working the fields, and they reduce the restrictions of how long they can work and things like that, and they could pay people $7-8 an hour. They still have people working those farms. Well, you get up farther north where that labor isn't there, and what happens? All of a sudden, everything's automated. You have the massive combines, you have all these different things. So we're getting rid of the whole unskilled labor segment by outpricing it. The unions are pushing the cost of unskilled labor up above the cost of automation and technology. And so there's an argument to be made that unions are a big part of why we're not going to have unskilled labor.
And we have an employment problem, and that's that we don't have employees. In the United States, we have an employment crisis, and that's that we don't have enough workers. So I think there's also this idea that, we're protecting them. Do you know how much we're paying for somebody to sit at a storage facility today? $25 an hour.
Babysitting. I'm paying a babysitter to watch Netflix, $25 an hour. Our kids are already in bed.
And it's like we have an absolute labor problem right now in the United States. And so I don't think there's this idea that, like, if we let unions go, which are only 10% of the economy, that all of a sudden we're going to have huge labor issues, because the rest of the economy, just because they don't have unions, doesn't mean workers are paid nothing and dumb. That's not true at all. And so I think that, when you look at it, the people that are arguing in the unions are saying that we live below our means. Well, all of a sudden then you go, hold on here, but isn't that the whole reason? So I don't know. I think that it's going to be irrelevant.
Let me make one last point.
All right, one last point, Jay, and then we got to wrap this up.
So for the last 30 years, we've seen these types of industries, these types of jobs be offshored. We've seen manufacturing go to Taiwan, to China, to other East Asian countries, and Americans have been complaining. They've been bitching and saying, hey, this isn't fair. We need to bring things back to America. We need things to be American made. And a lot of us have been saying, yeah, that's great, but be prepared to pay more for it. And now with COVID, well, there's a big push to start bringing back manufacturing in the U.S. Well, let me tell you something. This is one of the things you're going to deal with when we bring manufacturing back to the U.S., and we're going to have to pay for it. So everybody out there is going to have to make that hard decision. Do you want your cheap crap from China with us not building it here, or are you actually truly willing to pay more for that stuff to be built here and for the workers who are building it to actually get a living wage?
And to AJ's point, what's going to end up happening is the government's probably going to subsidize it, and that's going to come out of our pockets anyway. So I do want to make one final point. I think we should preface that this entire discussion was about private sector unions. We never really touched on public sector unions. If you want to talk about police officers, teachers, things like that, necessary services, we're not touching on that. That's, unions obviously play a much different role for those and have different values. So that's not what we're talking about. Okay.
Thank you for calling that out. That's an important point.
For sure. All right. Whenever we have a guest host, we like to get a new perspective from an industry that we don't necessarily get, because we have a lot of commercial real estate going on here. We've discussed ground up construction in previous episodes when it comes to apartments, when it comes to self-storage. But we have kind of a single family expert joining with us. So we'd be remiss not to hit him up for some knowledge bombs. So, Nathan, I know you've been doing a lot of new construction housing, just like the commercial markets. Things have been maybe a bit rocky. Is that still the case today, or is there light at the end of the tunnel, or what are you seeing?
So I think honestly, it's a tale of two cities right now, and it's been an interesting kind of I don't know if dilemma is the word, but interesting to work through. So I'm going to give you some statistics and then share kind of my feelings about it. So Q2, so check this out. First of all, from just a high level perspective in single family space, because I work both in the retail fix and flip as well as new construction development. So and shout out to Jason Hartman, who's awesome and very intellectually smarter than me. So by the way, 65% of all mortgages in the United States right now are under 4% interest rate. So when we keep hearing about the crisis of buying, of course, a huge majority of these properties are actually still sub 4% interest rate, and a lot of them under 3%. So there are 4.5 months right now of homes under construction, which is incredibly above a normal quote unquote level over the last number of years. But 1.4 months of actual completed inventory, which is normal. So thinking about the fact that there's such a high level of actual inventory being that's under construction, but not that much that is completed. And I found this pretty interesting as well, that there's 23% of all inventory nationally is new construction, which is very close to the record of all time of new construction. And so for what we've been finding is we are crushing it still in that sub, say, if you look at the median price point of any market that we are in and building, if you are under that median number, we still have lots of buyers because there's, less and less inventory. And then we've found that anything in that, like say 700, 800, 900,000 range is still selling pretty well because those buyers are not affected as much by the interest rates. A lot of them are cash. And then one last point on the from a cycle perspective. So the recent cycle, we had 4 million in January 2023 total, and we are likely to hit of sales, and we're likely to hit a new sales low in September. And so I think think about that from an inventory perspective. You are literally seeing the least number of sales potentially in the history of the tracking of the marketplace. So for us, we are really focused on that place that first-time home buyers are coming into because they're having such a hard time buying inventory, finding inventory. And
are you still able to make the numbers work for those low income, or like I shouldn't say lower income, but those lower level houses? Because what we're seeing in our area is in the last couple of years, basically the cost of construction going up, the interest rate costs, all of that going up, that basically the builders in our area, they can't make the numbers work at that sub, let's call it even 700,000. Like they need, the only houses that are getting built in our area are those 1.5 million plus, because they can still make their spreads on those. If they add 10% to that, they're still making a decent spread, versus if they're adding 10% to, a $400,000 house, like that's not enough to cover their costs. So we're seeing that shift here where I haven't seen a single family house or development or community that goes in that's not over that 1.5 million mark.
We're building in Texas right now a lot, and we actually have sold numerous duplexes at sub 300,000, and we are able to deliver those because we did the development, so we did the ground, we did the vertical, and honestly, from a development cost perspective too, I would say, so I'm also in the Kansas City market. We have seen an incredible increase in the price of building and the price of the development. So we were much more priced out in that market. But I'd say here it's probably more like 400,000 to 600,000 in KC. But I do see those upper price point homes, but we really are not we are moving a ton of those lower price point ones, and we've been able to keep our costs low because we took out, we made them, we value added them, right? We made them actually cheaper. We made the square footage smaller, and we've been able to still see an increase in our price per square foot because there wasn't that much inventory to sell. And so honestly, I think the light at the end of the tunnel. Well, actually, let me say one thing, because I'm curious what you guys will say. I think that this moment in the history of real estate, in the next 12, 24, 36 months, if you do not buy a house and you are an FHA buyer, you're 3%, conventional buyer, you are going to get priced out and you are never going to be able to buy, because interest rates, as they go down, they attract more and more buyers, and interest rates as they go up, those buyers can't buy. And there's just too much competition. As
a
interest
lot
rates
of
go
people
down.
are saying we're already there. A lot of people say that if you didn't buy back in 2020 or 2021 or before then, that you're already priced out. What are you building for these days? Can you talk about that? I'm not asking for. I don't want to ask anything too personal in your business, but just general ballpark.
So in Texas, we're sub $100 a square foot in Texas, and in KC we are in like what's that?
On build?
Yep.
Do you put drywall on your walls, or
The Chinese
Well,
stuff.
occasionally we use paper mache because it's a little cheaper, but yeah, so we're still building very inexpensively there. What we've seen though is the actual development cost, because we've sit both in development seat and we sit in the vertical. So the development has actually gone up significantly. I would say in KC we were more like 125 to 145, depending on, this was still like those median average price point homes, like say mid threes. But honestly, when I look at those coastal markets, or I look at, when you're spending $200, $300, $400 a square foot, it's hard to make any math work for somebody who's trying to just buy their first home.
So those are your hard costs. I mean, are you seeing land costs continue to skyrocket, or have they leveled out? Or are they going down? What's going on?
or
with land
maybe you
costs
have
right
to
now?
you kind of have to shift a little bit farther outside. I've seen kind of
We've had to definitely shift further outside. We've also seen like we've taken smaller plots too. So we did a 99 lot development last year. We did a 97 lot development. We have built a number of other smaller multifamilies as well. And you can't actually make the smaller multifamilies work even at that price point right now to cash flow. They just don't work because of interest rate. But the land cost, we've seen where we can actually, we're almost at the medium where we can buy some of the deals already ready to go, finished lots at the same price that we can actually develop them for. So we've been looking for those deals where we can find and acquire them and just build on them day one, versus having that, 9, 12, 18 months of, infrastructure and all the nightmare with the city. But there are still deals that work. And that's what I think people don't understand. You can make it both work as an investor deal. We've sold literally a dozen duplexes in 6 weeks. So people are actually still buying and they're still making them work. But I think it's very, very much that, if it's a Rust Belt or Texas, Midwest, where it's not, incredibly appreciated over the last, 3-4 years.
If you had a crystal ball, what do you think in terms of development and land costs over the next couple of years? Do you think we're going to see it continue to go up, or do you think we're going to see a leveling off? Do you think we're going to see, obviously the economy is going to play a role, but assuming the economy kind of stays where it's been, what do you think?
I think it just keeps going up. We're not seeing any trend down. And I think the other challenge is, 65% of mortgages under 4%. So those sellers, if they don't need to sell, they are not selling. And I think we'll continue to see that new construction climb as the percentage of sales. I don't have a crystal ball as far as like what percentage. I'm not that smart. Maybe one of you guys have a concept, but
we're seeing a lot of land banking. So originally developers, we were seeing a lot of people develop, and I don't know about you guys, but the discussions and things we're hearing is like last year at the end, even in high rates, we were still seeing houses come online. From what we're seeing today is that's shut down. They're holding the land. They'll do a little, but they're not doing mass developments of homes. They're waiting. And they're just a little worried about.
Is that accidental
volume.
though? Like, is that something where they had other plans and the interest rates came up? And
They said they're stopping. They said we're holding off because we're too worried about a certain amount of volume because we don't know if they'll all trade.
But they had bought that land planning to do something, and now they're pivoting.
If you had an average time of like say 18 months, 12 months to development, like from ground to, and I don't know what you guys' markets are, but that's where we played in that year and a half. So I mean, you went from what interest rate environment to what interest rate environment, and so that's why we've been very thoughtful in even navigating. Now we will land bank. So I agree with you, AJ. I think it's buying strategically, and that's where like, hey, we can buy a finished lot that's close to the price of what it would cost us 9 months, 12 months, 18 months from now. We will land bank that property, but we're also looking at saying, okay, what is your average consumer buyer doing? They're not looking really truly at the interest rate. They're not looking truly at the purchase price of the home. What are they looking at?
How much is going to cost them a month?
How much does it cost? Yeah. So that's the number that matters.
So are you doing, so I've seen actually in some areas, new construction's got a huge advantage because they've, once again, you say you have like 99 units, 97 units, something like that. And they've worked out ways to basically buy down interest rates or do things like that to make it more affordable. And actually, when you buy down interest rates, you can qualify for larger loans because the debt to income is better. Are you having to do any of that, or are you in markets that you kind of just the demands there enough and your price point is low enough that people are just going to show up anyway?
We've done some of both. We've worked on the buy downs, but I will say from a practical standpoint, it's actually pretty complicated to try to explain that to a person who's buying it, who doesn't understand what that actually means. And so we found actually a lot more fear in people trying to understand, like, well, what does that actually mean in 12 months, 24 months?
They don't know how to do the math.
Yeah. I mean, because then it's that fear of like, oh, well, you're actually baiting me into this thing that, down the road is not actually what, I agreed to, where I understood in the first place. So honestly, I really think we are going to see properties smaller on smaller lots, and that are just, simply from a price point perspective and from a dollar perspective of, monthly cost, they're just going to be smaller. And we've even built stuff in Texas now that has no garage. It's like, 1,000 square foot, 1,100 square feet, that it's much smaller than something that was built, 12, 18 months ago. And those are the ones that they're flying off the shelf, because those first time home buyers, they'd much rather have that's new than they would that, kind of renovated 1980, 1970 house that, they're not sure about.
Isn't infill because I mean, if you're looking at, projects, you're trying to get those much more niche product specialty where people will buy further in. So I feel like we're going to see a lot more infill where people are looking, okay, strategically people want to move in, right? They need to live close to work. They're moving into this area or whatnot. I think one of the problems that what I see is the mass housing developments, because the carrying cost. So the carrying cost and the unknown at what level we can sell, that starts to really eat away your balance sheet, your cash flow statements.
The other side though is, when we bought infill, we bought, many of them and built them. The problem is there's no scale. And so it's the same amount of effort to build that one house when you could go build 10 or 15 or 20 houses with the same guy. And so, and we've done that. I've done that. I bought those cheap infill lots, but the cost becomes the time and it's not the money. But, of course, it's just not worth it. So I think the infill lots become interesting in neighborhoods that are, say, like that $1 million neighborhood, $2 million neighborhood where you have a, $300,000, $400,000 tear down. Well, now it's actually worth it, because that buyer, you can actually make the delta work between the cost of building that home that goes on that lot versus like, what we're building, where it's a development that's built for that first time home buyer. And so and by the way, we haven't talked about this, but when you look at the hedge funds as well, I was having conversations with hedge funds and kind of watching where their minds are, their money is. And I'd been on a conversation, a phone call with a gentleman. Their hedge fund had just raised $2.6 billion with a B, and they'd made an offer on a house 325, whatever it was. 6 weeks later, they're at 295, and 6 weeks later, they're 265. And these guys, there's billions and billions and billions of dollars chasing these deals because they have realized they've figured out the formula. And so now my same thinking around this is, where are the people that are spending those the $1 billion money? They're buying these same kind of projects. They're buying these same kind of things because they have scale. They can park capital, and they're going to go up because there's not enough inventory for people to go find.
August numbers were dismal. So the housing starts for August, they were at over 1,200. It was almost 1,300. But I mean, that's the lowest even for 2023 that, we've seen in the last several years. And the housing starts earlier when you're talking like May, things like that, were substantially higher than that.
I don't think that's shocking, though, when you look at the interest rate. That interest rate environment keeps going up and builders start slowing. But think about it. We go through this same cyclical problem. So you slow down, and then, oh gosh, interest rates, and I don't know what your opinion on, when interest rates either stabilize or go down, but what happens? Well, all those builders come back, right? And there's more inventory to come in the market because all of those sellers who are now, sitting in that home that has a ton of equity because of all of the appreciation over the last couple of years. So now who's the biggest buyer? Well, the person selling a home. So then it's just that much harder for that, new home buyer to buy.
It sounds like you've kind of found a niche that's you're sheltered a little bit, because if you get down to that level where there's always going to be that demand, where there's the people who are buying your houses, they all want to buy houses. There's more people who want to buy houses than there are houses. If you get up to that higher level, then that's kind of like a choice of like, oh yeah, maybe I'll buy this house, maybe I won't, or maybe I'll stay in my own, maybe I'll do that. Well, new first-time home buyers and people who are at starter homes, they want to buy a house, they just can't. And so you're always going to have that demand. So if you can build houses at that level and make profit on it, I think I don't see it ever correcting. Even if you see a housing correction, the demand is so much there that housing correction, usually there's probably interest rates are going to drop. It's going to be more affordable for all those people who are looking to buy their starter or their first home. And the demand's going to prop the housing prices up so that it's going to be fine.
One thing, hey, Jay, can I just say one more thing, which I think the other interesting part is, and I'm trying to find it in my notes, but the actual percentage of the price of homes is up year over year too. So let's not forget, we saw a slight decline, but we are up from a price point. So even in the midst of what people were calling for this bloodbath in the marketplace, the price has not actually declined.
Final point, Jay, here.
Yeah, I was just going to say, while you guys were talking, I went online and I just did a quick search for like average building costs per square foot across the U.S. And it's not scientific because it's not weighted by number of builds or whatever, but just looking at the average cost these days in each state and averaging them out, it looks like it's somewhere in the $235 per square foot range. If we're talking about a new starter home, like what was historically been a starter home, somewhere around 1,500 square feet at the average of $235 per square foot, we're talking about $350,000 to build a new starter home. That doesn't include the land costs. That doesn't include the entitlement costs. So we're probably getting somewhere up towards $400,000 if the average cost of, more than that. So the average cost of a new house these days is somewhere in the $420,000, $430,000 range. Basically, there's no margin for builders unless prices go up or costs go down. And so you can see builders kind of being priced out. The other thing I want to say is, going back to AJ's point earlier, about land banking, there was a lot of discussion. It was earlier this summer, and I know Kyle and I talked about it a bunch in the multifamily space, about how there's all of this inventory that was going to be coming online in the next couple of years, and some high profile people in the industry were talking about the fact that there was going to be a glut of housing in the next couple of years, because all of these builders are building all of this inventory, especially in a couple of the states that we're in. And Kyle and I and Ashley had long discussions about the fact that that's probably not true, because first, a lot of that stuff doesn't actually come online, even if it's intended. Second, with costs going up, a lot of these builders are changing their minds and deciding not to move forward with a lot of these projects. And what we're seeing as of just a couple of weeks ago, some data came out that showed that that permits, the number of permits being pulled, is basically at a 3-year high. Builders are building permits, but the actual number of housing starts, builders that are starting to build houses or build multifamily units, is at the lowest point it's been since 2020. So builders are thinking they're going to build, they're preparing to build, they're building, they're pulling permits in anticipation of building, but they're not actually pulling the trigger on that for some reason. And I think that the reason's probably pretty obvious. It's pure economics.
Well, one point to the last point, which I love what you just said, and I agree with you. And I think also from a credit standpoint, when you look at the cost of building from what it was when they were looking at that development, or they put that thing under contract and put all the infrastructure in, their costs doubled. I mean,
that's a really good point. I'm assuming everything's being paid with cash, but the reality is they're going out to investors or banks, and there's a cost to that capital.
100%.
Yeah, it seems like once they've gotten to that point where they've pulled a loan and broken ground, those ones are getting completed. But anybody who's kind of not got to that point, have pulled permits and not having, have to kind of just ride the wave, that they've shovels down and they're waiting for, to AJ's point before, land banking.
Well, and one last point. One more? So the other thing too is when you think about from a capital crunch standpoint, if there are actual issues, which I'm sure you've talked about in other podcasts, from the commercial side of lending, commercial side of real estate, think about capital crunch of a bank. So we actually heard this week of a bank that we have worked with that used to be Johnny on the spot, 24 hours, they'd have the construction draws out, and now it's taking them 4, 5, 6, 7 days to get that money out. And so, I think that's the other thing we have to be, leery of or thoughtful of, is what are the institutions, if you're working with, from a liquidity standpoint and from a capitalization, are they able to actually perform on the banking side as well?
AJ, you want to wrap this up?
Yeah, I think just in summary, the housing problem's not going away. We either need interest rates to go down to make it affordable, or mass influx of new supply, both of which are not happening in the time frame, in any reasonable time frame. And I think that means we're going to have prolonged higher prices for housing for years to come.
Fair enough. All right, we're getting a little long here, but let's sneak in, if you guys are good with it, let's sneak in our last topic, the insurance risks. So we had Brian Burke on the other day, and we kind of ran out of time before we got to talk about the impact of insurance has on commercial real estate and, and single family. They're both seeing it. So we thought we would try and pick up that topic this week with the increase in frequency and severe weather events have had skyrocketing insurance costs, which is crushing investors already plagued by high interest rates. Jay, I know we discussed this on an episode about a year ago, so it's been almost exactly a year since we last discussed it. So what have you been seeing? Have things been getting better over the last year, or are we worse, or are we just kind of seeing the same thing?
No, they're actually, it's worse. So just from a pure data standpoint, 2022, we saw across the board homeowner insurance increases of 7%. In 2023, it's anticipated that we're going to end the year at 9%. And now you might be thinking 7%, 9%, relatively low numbers. But let's remember inflation was at 7 and 9%. And you see what happens when you see this cumulative. Basically, it's not just 1 year of 7% and 1 year of 9%. Every year there's this cumulative compounding effect. And if insurance keeps going up at 7 or 8 or 9% a year, we're talking about it doubling if you use the rule of 72 in 7 or 8 or 9 years. And so seeing your insurance double every like 3/4 of a decade is just it's going to start to hurt people significantly. Now, that's the average across the board. You look at some states. I live in Florida, and so just to use Florida as an example, and it turns out that Florida is the highest increase in property insurance over the last year. But on average, in Florida, homeowner insurance has gone up 66%, average of $8,000 per house. In Florida, I live in probably a little bit nicer than average house, but it's not a mega mansion, and I'm paying close to $10,000 a year in insurance, which is double what I was paying last year, literally double. I have 2 rentals. Both my rentals are somewhere in the $250,000 range in terms of value. One of them is $6,200 a year in homeowners or landlord insurance. The other $7,200.
And that's not even including flood insurance, right? Like you're not on the coast.
One of those that is including flood insurance.
But like your personal residence, there's no flood insurance there, right?
No, if I needed flood insurance on my house, we're probably talking about another $10,000 or $20,000 a year.
10 or 20,000 additional. And so from an economic standpoint, let's talk about this as a landlord. If I used to pay $1,000, $1,500 a year in insurance on a rental property, typical rental property, and my rents were somewhere in the $1,400, $1,500, $1,600 a year like they were, I was essentially paying 1 month of rent, about 8% of my total gross income every year towards insurance. Now it's $6,000 or $7,000 with rent somewhere in the $1,700, $1,800 a month range. I'm paying 25% of my total gross rent, 4 months rent or 3 months rent to insurance. So literally, I'm taking a third of the rent that I'm generating, and I'm giving that to the insurance company. It's really hard for landlords, at least in this state, to make any money in terms of cash flow. Now, I'm complaining because I'm in California. I'm in Florida, but it's not just Florida. If you look at, we think about hurricanes as being the big risk down here, but if you look at the top 5 states for high insurance, Florida's number 1. But 3, 4, and 5 are Oklahoma, Alabama, and Kansas. They don't get hurricanes. They get tornadoes. And then you go to California, and then you go to Louisiana is number 2. That gets hurt.
Well, California is the wildfires, right?
California is the wildfires and the earthquakes, and then Louisiana has the hurricanes, and then Texas has hurricanes. And so it's a lot of states. I mean, from the multifamily standpoint, again, this isn't empirical. This is just my observations, but we have a few properties in Houston. One of them has more than doubled in insurance over the last year. 2 of them have gone up a good 50% over the last year. So this is something that's really going to affect a lot of investors as well as homeowners over the next few years, especially if you assume that the climate's changing and weather is going to get worse and storms are going to get worse and we're going to see more catastrophic risk. So the big question is, what happens? Do insurance companies start to leave the state as they've done in Florida? Do they start to leave other states?
Well, it's not just start. If we dive into this, that's the main reason, is that it's not necessarily that these insurance providers are all just staying put and they're just increasing their costs because they've had more claims. It's these insurance providers are literally looking at the state and saying, we don't want to be here. Like the biggest news one was, I think, State Farm, which is obviously a massive insurance company, just left the state of California. It was completely left. And so, and we're saying it when Jay talked about the one property that our insurance costs went up, doubled, that's because the carrier that we had just left the state. They said we're not covering this area anymore. And so what happens is you're left with less insurance providers who are covering your area, and they don't want to oversaturate their book of business in a certain area either. Like they want to be able to, they have a certain, so Jay said Houston, they have a certain allotment of insurance policies that they want to give out in Houston. And they, have a certain allotment that they want to give out in Florida, and they don't want to go above that. And so when providers leave the area, then everybody rushes to get on these other providers and they get maxed out. So basically, just like anything, like airline tickets or with this, the cost, if they only have 2 slots left, they start charging double. for those last two slots because it's a for-profit business. And that's what we get. So we when we go around and we reshop that loan policy or that insurance policy that has to renew, we go to all these different carriers and they say we're full, and we can't find one unless we pay double. And so there's a lot of people who are paying. They only got a 10% increase because they're on that book of business. They're already on that insurance carrier and they just keep renewing. But anybody who has to renew in an area that a carrier has left the complete area, then that's when they're seeing those massive increases.
And my big concern isn't so much that the cost of insurance keeps going up. Obviously, obviously that's a huge concern. But the big concern that I have is the catastrophic risk. And it's part of the reason why I've stopped buying in Florida. We don't buy multifamily in Florida. If one day you wake up and there's one big storm or two or three big storms, and basically all the insurance companies say, we're no longer going to insure this property. Now that property has literally, like, the value has dropped to near zero because you can't resell it. And that's the catastrophic risk, that you literally lose 100% of the value in your property because it can't be resold because you can't get insurance.
Yeah, the concentration of risk has become a huge problem in the United States because of really two factors. The number one factor is the allocation of premium to claims, and it is so astronomically skewed because the vast majority of liability is concentrated in basically 3-4 markets: Florida, California, New York, which, if we remember from a week ago, is flooding. And then you have Texas. Well, guess where the most claims come from in the United States? California, Texas, Florida, New York. So the problem you get is you have all of your risk, and that's where you're allocating, right, all of your overall claims dollars. So that is not a good spread. In insurance, you have to offset risk. Well, if I can't offset Texas with California and I've got to go where? To the Midwest, how do you offset premium from Florida to the Midwest? There's not enough properties to even do it. So all of a sudden, your risk profile is horrendous. And that's what we saw in the hurricanes. You literally can't offset it anymore. So the only way to offset it is through premiums. The problem is the risk profile of properties in the United States sucks. And that is a problem I'm not sure how we get around, because there's only so much premium that you can charge before people first can't pay it anymore, but then also to offset the risk of a hurricane that wipes out an entire state. And that's a big problem.
Here's my question. So I couldn't find the number for the US. Maybe one of you guys have it. But in 2023, $194 billion in the first half of 2023 globally was a loss. 27% of it covered by insurance. My question, and there's been an increasing number, the delta between the actual, the actual losses to those insurance companies over time. So what actually happens as we continue to see, assuming if that's true, over the next, 2, 3, 5, 10, 20 years, those continue to climb, the percentage continues to climb. That's the question I keep thinking about, because
I think it's one of two things. Either the government steps in and regulates, and I know
they already are in certain areas.
They already are in certain areas. I know in Florida, the legislature is talking about stepping in and doing something. But barring that, I think you see a tremendous migration of population from certain states to other states, and you see housing values fluctuate based on that.
But there's certain areas you can't do that. Like I'm sure everyone saw like the news articles when last time Louisiana got hit by hurricanes, and they would do these pieces on basically these people who have been hit 3 times. Their house has been flooded, basically decimated, and rebuilt 3 times in them living in the house. And the problem is they can't resell it. Nobody wants it because it gets hit with hurricanes every time. And so they can't move, and they're not, they don't have the income to pick up and and just move somewhere else. So they just keep insurance, just pays it, rebuilds it, and they're stuck. And so that's why when we say people stepping, Louisiana, so they started seeing insurance companies leave, and now they're offering millions of dollars in subsidies for insurance companies to basically come back to the state and reinsure their properties. And I think we're going to see more of that, where we're going to have to see, I don't know if it's at the state level, or we'll probably need a national, like we saw it with flood insurance, right? So flood insurance was a huge issue. We like insurance companies aren't making and will never make money on flood insurance on coastal properties. And so the state had to come in with a program to cover flood insurance, to basically say, okay, like all of these people who own properties on the coasts, like they're not going to lose everything because they can't get insurance. So I think we're going to see something like that at just the normal level, not just flood insurance.
Well, and I think, though, Jay's right. We're going to, because look at the growth that's happened in New Orleans. It's gone. And the reason it's gone is because nobody will go back there. And when people are like, that's bad, it's below sea level. When the largest river in the, like, you shouldn't be doing it. Why incentivize people to do it? It's stupid. You should not be doing it. Insurance carriers should not need to do it.
When they and the government did the opposite, right? Last time they got hit with the hurricane, they gave all these tax incentives for investors to come in and invest and rebuild New Orleans. You know, basically you could offset all your capital gains if you just built something in New Orleans.
But can't you say the same thing about Florida? Can't you say the same thing about parts of California? Can't you say the same thing about the Midwest where tornadoes hit? I mean, you can make that argument for a lot of places that people just shouldn't live there.
No, there's whole entire cities in the Midwest that have never been hit by a tornado, and hurricanes are not nearly as damaging to Florida as they are when you're 15 feet below sea level. New Orleans will always flood. It's like they're trying to make it into something that literally Earth is trying to get rid of. So I think that there's some cases where it's too much risk, and we kind of got to just say it is.
Okay, AJ, you just made me think of something. So we were at the same place in Hawaii, and the beach at that resort was incredible, or the resort was incredible, but that beach, I can't remember. I don't know if you remember, AJ, how much beach they'd lost in the last, handful of years or whatever. But the thing we haven't even talked about is, what are the locations that actually lose? So they used to have a huge beach at that Hyatt in Maui, and now they have 12 feet, 18 feet, 20 feet. It's not much. So at what point does that actual, climate change or weather events or whatever you want to call it, you actually, not only are you having weather events, but you're actually losing actual real estate that you will never get back because it's gone.
The problem is people want to live there.
Yeah, if you want to see the income divide, you'll see it, because the rich areas, all of a sudden money will get poured in there. They'll figure out some scientific way of building that back up and taking care of it. And the areas that don't have the money, they're going to be gone.
They're gone. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Florida, though, is a perfect example, Jay. Southern Florida is a swamp.
Yep.
And they had to do billions and billions of dollars of work just to build the basics. Then they built skyscrapers, and they built them right on the beach, where hurricanes. I mean, the ingenuity that we've put in to live in areas that we're not supposed to be living in is shocking.
Heck, so overseas in the United Arab, don't they build islands now? Like they can, like if you have enough money and you have the willpower, you can take care of these issues.
Yeah. So I think that's the problem that we have. Then insurance companies, though, are the ones that are taking the hit. And at some point they go, wait, you should have never been here. And now you're asking us to insure a risk for something that's basically a guarantee. I'm not sure how we overcome that issue, how much taxpayers think that they should, subsidize for people that live 15 feet below sea level. It's a problem that's not going away, but people don't necessarily want to live in New Orleans, but they definitely want to live in Florida. So
the other thing that I was looking at when I was researching this topic was the reinsurance. So not only was it the insurance company, but it's the actual insurance to the insurance company that are also taking losses. And so at what point does, Berkshire Hathaway say, peace out. We're not, putting billions of dollars behind this anymore.
They already have several places.
They're already starting to divest. I'm going to go on record and say Florida, despite the fact that it's the state with the highest migration into it for the last couple of years, I suspect over the next few years that's going to change drastically, and we're going to see a migration out of it for no other reason than insurance costs.
I might take the other side of that, and I think it's because sometime in the next 10 years we're going to see a massive government program to step in and help out with the insurance, because it's going to. If you want to talk about cost of living, we just don't have any bigger. We just have bigger fish to fry right now, with other things going on, and eventually insurance is going to be the it thing that everyone wants to focus on. They're going to start doing news pieces on how much people are paying for insurance. It's going to become political. We're going to get the right time in an election cycle, and there's going to be a massive push for it. So I think sometime in the next 10 years,
I'm making a note. Episode 547, we're going to revisit this and see who's right.
I'm with Kyle.
All right, fair enough. Let's wrap this up. The top 10, and I'm excited to do this top 10 because Mauricio's not here to shit on my parade.
We doing this? Oh, come on! I'm so tired. I want to be done.
I'm not tired at all. I'm fired up about the top 10. I would appreciate
Nathan.
if you would actually start getting to it right now.
Okay,
we're talking insurance.
Okay, so what got me to here is I was interested to see how much influence the United Auto Workers had. And I was like, how big are the United Auto Workers, and how big are they as far as unions go in the U.S.? So they're actually number 6 on the largest sized unions in the U.S. So I'm just going to quickly run through the other ones. So number 1 is the National Education Association. So that's public school employees. We talked about that, how public unions are a little bit different. Number 2, so they have 3 million members. Number 2 is the Service Employees International Union. That's healthcare workers. Number 3, American Federal State, County, Municipal. So that once again, that's state and municipal workers. Number 4, I'm going to say the name and you can guess what they are. The Teamsters. Any guesses?
Yeah, that's the truckers.
Truck drivers are called, their union is called the Teamsters. So it's truck drivers, also warehouse workers, but basically the trucking industry. But I had no idea. I saw Teamsters. I was like, what is that?
Can we just mention that number 1, Education Association, founded in 1857, Service Employees founded in 1921, and all of these are founded, Teamsters founded in 1903. So back to our conversation about this.
Before Social Security, before any of it.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, and rounding up the top 5 is the United Food and Commercial Workers, and they do like retail type stuff. And so the number 6 is United Auto Workers. They're at 990,000, so they're just under 1 million.
So you're Canadian, so I'll give you a pass on it. But Jimmy Hoffa, if you know who Jimmy Hoffa was, he was head of the Teamsters when he was disappeared.
Oh, okay, fair enough. Rounding out the top 10 is steel workers. Actually, number 8 is also teachers. So not only do they have number 1 with 3 million, there's another teachers union with 800,000. Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, and then the Laborers International Union of North America. So for laborers.
The number 1 most powerful union in the world is the teachers union. And we have one of the worst education system in the world. We'll just leave it at that.
I don't want to get into it, but I think it's because they're not paid enough, to be honest. And I also think it's because so teachers aren't paid enough, and I think police officers aren't paid enough. So
I agree, teachers aren't paid enough, and I don't think that has anything to do though with the education system, because they're funded like twice as much as private schools are funded per head. So it just makes you wonder, where does all our money go to?
Well, if you paid teachers $200,000 a year, you'd have some pretty good teachers. All I'm saying. All right,
and we can, but where's the money going?
Let's finish this off with a quick game. I think I did this on a episode with Jay and I. This question, but not on the drunk real estate. And since we have some fresh blood on this episode, I thought I'd recycle it. So the game is Would You Rather. So would you rather have $1 million cash or $3 million that can never leave a brokerage account until you retire? So like a TD brokerage, so you can only invest in stocks, mutual funds, things like that. I'll start with Nathan, since you're the new guy. What do you think?
Yes, sir. Well, I gave this a fair amount of thought, And originally my answer was the million, but actually I'm going to go with the 3 million in the brokerage account because I can crush it in real estate. I can go and buy and sell stuff. And so I love, and I am on a mission to actually be more diversified in my portfolio. And so I'm going to go with the 3 million. I'm going to go that it continues to help diversify my real estate portfolio, or diversify against my portfolio. And it also leaves me in a way that I'm not even thinking about it. It's gaining and earning. I'm going and crushing in real estate. And I come back to it when I'm retired.
Fair enough. I have a feeling there might be some dissenting opinions here. So we'll go to AJ next.
Go to Jay. I'm thinking here.
All right, Jay.
So I'm gonna use this as my opportunity for my plug. I've got this book here called.
All right, this is your one plug. You don't get another one.
Plug.
All right.
Real Estate by the Numbers. I wrote this book last year. If you skip to page 114, you will see a subheading called "Would You Rather?"
Did you steal that from me?
I think I might have stolen it from you. And it asks the question, specifically, would you rather have $2 million in cash right now or $200,000 per year for the rest of your life? So it's a little bit different, but it's the same math. And I spend 4 pages talking about this concept called discounted cash flow analysis, or DCF. And so there is a mathematical solution to this question, and it depends on, one, what you're going to do with each versions of the money, and two, how long do you have until retirement? So how long do you have before you can get that money? And you do the math, and it'll spit out a number for you.
Nerd alert.
I'm real estate.
This is a fun question, and you're out there going, I'm gonna.
He's totally failing already on the question, and we haven't even gotten the answer yet.
If we calculate, if we assume that retirement happens in 21.6 years from now, and we get a 10% return on our money in $1 million, and we get a 7% return on our money in the brokerage account, then it would take approximately 18.6 years for us to break even.
You know, my investors actually appreciate the fact that I sound like that. My answer is the 3 million. And the reason for that is because I'm a lot closer to retirement than you guys are. And so based on what I think I could earn on that money and the discount rate of each of those investments, pick up the book and you'll understand why I would take the $3 million.
You didn't even give the answer to the answer. You pick up the book. Like, can't you give us like the 2-sentence version of why?
No, I spent 4 pages talking about it. It's math.
Yeah, he's got to leave it open so people buy his book. I get it. That's fair.
Okay.
AJ, what's
3
your
million
call?
just because I know what I can do with it.
Jeez, so I have to be the dissenting opinion. I'm going 1 million all day, every day. I hate the idea. I just absolutely hate being restricted in a brokerage account. There's only a few things you can invest in. At any time in my life, I've needed to invest in different things. Sometimes I need some more insurance. Sometimes I want to buy gold. Sometimes I want to, be aggressive and invest in stuff that is projecting 20 IRR. I can do that at any time with money that is mine. And I think
what would you do with it
right now at this moment?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. That's a whole, I'm not going into my whole portfolio with you right now, Jay. But I can pick what I want to do with it. I can't with a brokerage account. I could basically, do I want to go stocks or want to go bonds? And
no. So this is what you do. So you take your 3 million. Okay, I put it into a brokerage account. We have it.
I'll stop you if you're about to say you're going to leverage it and you're going to pull money on it. That doesn't count. That's cheating. We're not.
Well, you didn't say that.
Come on.
That's part of the question, Kyle.
That's against the spirit of the question.
That's what I do now, though. So why would I?
Well, yeah, because if you can leverage against a 3 million brokerage account, you can have 1.5 million cash. So that's breaking. That's breaking
more than that.
Well, okay, I'm saying 50% is usually the minimum, but you can get 50% all day on a brokerage account of leveraged cash. So that's breaking the spirit of the question. That's like getting your cake and eating it too. The point is
that's how finance works, though, baby. You want to get your cake and eat it too.
It's a game.
I'm 15 years older than you, Kyle. If I were your age, I would probably go that direction too.
Okay, and poo-poo, AJ, poo-poo. Now we have to do an episode where we talk about leveraged assets, because we could spend a whole day on that, where You want to invest in gold? Oh, gold's not an investment. Well, if you have gold and then you take a leverage account against it and you invest it in other things, then all of a sudden it makes it a little bit more enticing. But that's a whole segment that maybe we will drop a comment if you want to hear us talk about leveraging other assets for.
Okay,
for
let's
investment.
go. I'm feeling like Mauricio right now.
Yeah. Well, how's your drink doing?
Let's pour a little more wine, Jay.
I actually haven't. I've only.
You
had
call that a
glasses.
half? Hold that up. You say that's a half bottle?
Okay,
That's
no,
embarrassing.
You've drank 10% of that. That's like a half a glass that that is real embarrassing. Well, I don't know about you guys, but so first of all, we got to
There
talk.
we go. There we go.
There you go. Finish that off. Jay's already done his plug. So why don't we go to you, Nathan? Anything you want to plug? We appreciate you for being here. So try and sell something.
Absolutely. Well, you know what? I want to actually say I really enjoyed this. You guys are awesome. And for people who are actually listening to this, because I know there's a lot of them, these guys are all legit. I know them all, and they are all wonderful human beings and investors. So I'm just thankful to be here with you guys.
make sure you put that on your Facebook page and tell all the people that sent me DMs to subscribe.
Listen, I am fully committed to this, Jay, because I recognize this is not the last time I will be on this podcast.
Ooh.
Love it.
Nice.
So, no problem. So No Quitters Guide, I wrote the book as well. So like I said, you can read mine, be inspired, create a vision, and then go read Jay's or AJ's and have an actual game plan. And that's it. Come join my group as well, Bridge Real Estate Investing Meetup. Oh, boom. Thank you. No Quitters Guide there.
Looks very unopened, Jay, but it's good that you bought it.
I got an advanced copy that I read online.
Oh, okay. Fair enough. AJ, you want to plug a book too, since everyone's just plugging books?
No, I'll plug something different. Go check out. I've been doing a lot of work on the YouTube channel to build out a lot of stuff. So go check out Self-Storage Income, and we got some pretty cool facts, datas, and lots of good stuff on there. So go check that out.
I was actually at a conference a couple weeks ago, and they were selling AJ's book, and I went at the end of the conference to buy a copy, and they were sold out. So I was happy and sad about it. I was happy that it was popular, but I didn't get my copy.
That's what happens when you give a book away for free.
I thought normally a friend would mail a friend a copy. You know what I mean?
One day I hope AJ's a friend.
I don't know how your publisher agreements work, but free is not free with these book publishers. That was one rude awakening because I haven't read a book. Ashley wrote a book where you're like, oh, you feel like you could just give copies to books, whatever you want, because you're the author. No, the publisher does not like that. Fair enough. Well, since you guys plug books, I'm going to plug my wife again, but this time I'll plug her book. It's in the background over there. Only Woman in the Room for real estate investors. Go check that out on Amazon. It's about female investors, and I know everyone here, if they're not a woman themselves, they know someone who is a woman and has had
I know a woman.
Yeah, I know a couple. I got 3 in this house. So go check out that book. I don't know about you guys, but my drink is gone. I want to thank Nathan for joining us, filling in for
Thanks,
Mauricio.
Nathan.
Great job.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, man.
A little
Appreciate
collab.
That's right.
I think it's time for me to go hit the head. For everyone else, I will see you next Tuesday.